So I've been looking through your LinkedIn and your businesses, Cameron. You have been busy doing everything from a copywriter, even. I mean, wow.
I've had a very unusual career path. There's no doubt about that, especially for resulting in working as an investment banker. Yeah, no argument about that.
Well, careers are not a straight line. They really are a river and they just flow around different obstacles, get blockages and go in different directions. So yes, but you've done A's, you've done large scale, you do medium and small now. I've looked at your different businesses that you've previously worked at as well, and the changes you've made there are amazing. What was it? Capitus Group as well, some of the stuff that you did there. So I'll tell you a bit about the NA Profits Lessons from the Trenches. We're about
Okay.
learning from great people, and it's not always about their achievements. It's also about where things have gone wrong so that the viewers can learn how not to take, how these things, how they can avoid them really. Because I've made plenty of mistakes. There's no doubt about it. And yes, so it's always a conversation how we don't tend to. I've only ever had one person stick up a PowerPoint presentation, and I
Uh,
can't say that it was a good chat.
well, I think for these, I want to thank you in advance, really, for having me because uh, part of my mission at this point in my career is to try to share what I've learned. In my final job as a CEO, I had a guy come in one time and he said, "Well, what are you going to do after you retire?" And I said, "Well, I don't know yet." And he said, "Well, if because of my unusual career path, if you don't share what you've learned with others, then a lot of it just goes to waste." So that's one of my goals is to help other people in general, and certainly as it relates to business owners at a point in time where they decide to sell their business. And when I was a CEO, one of the key messages I tried to get our employees to understand is that failure is not a sin. And the turnaround deal I did, those people were so scared of making a mistake and so reluctant to try anything new because under the previous management, it would not have been good for their career, if not, chastised or whatever the case might be. So I tried to drive home the message that failure is not a sin. Now, you want to think through it right. You don't want it to be hazardous or happenstance, but it happens. And those are usually some of your best learning experiences. Now, you don't want to drag it out. You want to fail fast if you're going to fail. But if you're not failing, you're not trying and you're never going to really grow.
That is just so true. It really is. You look at the classic old one of the light blow. So the story goes that it was 1,000 tests, it was 1,001, but you fail quickly so that you can move on. You don't go down the road of failure. You recognize that it's not going to work and then move on to something else. But I think what the question that someone asked you that you mentioned, what are you going to do next? That is such a key one. And it's important because there is life after an exit. The question is, you've put all this effort into building this. Now you get the rewards of what does your future look like? What could you do if you wanted to do something? What do you want to achieve in the future?
So you're spot on with your question and your thoughts there. I will tell you from experience. So as you probably saw from my background over the years doing leverage roll-up for private equity firms, I acquired about 50 companies, a little over $500 million. And I can tell you almost without exception, the business owners that we bought their company from really had never asked themselves that question. And most of them never really thought about it because typical business owner, it's a 24/7, 365 job. They eat, sleep, and breathe it.
Sorry, did
It's
you say
their,
job or business owner? I got
well,
confused there.
the business owner.
I know, but then you
If
said job. They seem pretty much the same thing, don't they? They're not really business owners, are they? They're employees of the business.
Yeah, well, they truly are. Yeah, or sometimes they are a slave to the business because it's if it's an owner dependent business, their existence depends on them. But it's their ego validation, it's their social structure, and they don't really think about what life looks like after they exit a company. And a lot of them kind of crash and burn because they don't have a post sale life plan. For people who leave a company, as I've done on a few occasions, yeah, it can be a very scary process. You think, what's next? And sometimes you have to reinvent yourself.
And if you don't have that plan, you can quite easily burn through the money, because what you sell a business for isn't what goes into your bank account. You've got to pay your debts, your liabilities. You've got to pay taxes. You've got to pay administration, sales fees to brokers, whatever. And then you finally get something in your bank account. And then if you look in your bank account and think, oh, is that all? Then, and you don't have a plan as to what you're going to be doing, it can very quickly disappear.
Yeah, it really can. And even more important, one of the characteristics that I've seen so many times is even if they do get substantial wealth out of this and they realize that they don't have a life purpose after selling their company, because many of them owned a business for 20, 30, 40 years, they become amazingly, extremely risk averse, aren't willing to reinvest any of those funds, even if they've got enough they could live happily ever after with no concerns whatsoever and still pass on generational wealth to the next generation. They are almost all highly reluctant to take any risk in the future, which ironically is the inverse of why they became successful to begin with.
Yes. I have a mentor, a high 9-figure person, and he says that his brain is different to a billionaire's brain, 10-figure person. And I said, so why? He said, well, a 10-figure person, it's about risk. They're quite happy to go and stick it all on black, stick it all on red and roll the dice and risk it. Whereas a 9-figure person is still there, putting the systems in place, building the business, growing, and they're not prepared to risk everything. It's a different mindset. He said, so I much prefer the 9-figure mindset than the 10-figure mindset.
Yeah, very true. They're living in a different way for sure.
I'm going to be happy to figure it out for myself.
I'll be happy with that 7-figure mindset.
Well, just before I got on with you, I was on another call and I've been concentrating on dental roll-ups. But AI is such a crucial part of everything these days. And I was just on, and it's still going, a presentation on an AI roll-up organization. And what they're doing is they're putting together 100 different AI businesses. They're white labeling them, all going to be building their businesses, growing it, and then they're going to partner up and sell the whole lot as a big unit.
Interesting.
Very interesting.
I haven't heard of that, but it makes a lot of sense.
No, first time I've come across it. However, it's similar to something that I'm doing. I'm doing dental roll-ups at the moment. And I started off by going to my financier and saying, okay, what are you interested in? And they said, oh, well, we're interested in health. So I said, dental, okay. So I then went to the PE and I found a PE that's interested in dental. Fine. So now I've got my front end, my back end matched up. Now all I've got to do is the construction delivery in the middle. So it came to the time when I started to put this together and I just got a little red light in my head about the financier. And if you're going to get a red light at the beginning of a project, it's not going to get any better as you move through the project. You're better to take note of it first up. So I did that and I thought, okay, that was the Thursday. Friday lunchtime, I came up with a whole new idea. Okay, how do I do this without money? How do I put 30 dental practices together without money? Interesting.
All right. You got my attention.
Got your attention. Okay, fine. Then let's explore this. So really, you want to control them. You don't need to own them. You want to be able to control them. How do you control them? Well, one of the biggest issues with small businesses, and we don't have to talk dental here, small businesses is it's personal to them. They've built this themselves. It's their baby. They're in love with their business. They want to keep control. Fine. You keep control. You keep the liabilities. You keep the loans. I don't want any part of that. What I'm going to do for you is I'm going to offer you a back end. Do any of you like doing your accounting? Do any of you like doing your payroll, your people management, your HR, IT, all of that sort of stuff, all your back end stuff? Well, no, that keeps me up at night. I'd rather be sticking things in people's mouths. This is just between you and I, by the way. Otherwise, I think I just lost all my clients. But no, they're really good at sticking things in people's mouths. They're not business people. And most business people are slaves, as you said. And they don't do these 12 back-end columns very well, funnels very well. So if I take care of all of that and we grow your numbers and I put an option to buy, I give you an option, take out an option to buy on your practice when I'm ready. So I put out a 3-4 year option to buy. Then when it comes around to that time frame, if their numbers are good, then I execute the option. But they say, no, I still want to be me. I don't want to sell. The last thing I want to be involved with is anybody that doesn't want to be on the journey. So fine, scratched. You're not a part of it. You're out. Fine. If you don't want to execute the option to buy, I'm not going to force you. See, you've still got total control. So I've eliminated their major issue of total control and losing control of their business. They have total control all the way through. Now, someone said, how are you going to make this work? What if they don't want to come along? I said, well, that's okay. I said, they've got total control. But I said, all I can entice them to is their business is worth 1.5 million as is. If they come along and roll up 30 together, well, their business is now not worth 1.5 million. It's worth 4.5 million. So you either come on the journey or you don't. Do you want the extra 3 million? Fine. Come with me. We'll do it together. Otherwise, you're okay. I don't need you. You're still paying for the back end to be managed. I'm doing all right out of that. So no skin off my nose at all. I'm doing it as a co-op rather than as a buying them and controlling them. So then I execute the buy option 6 months out before the PE sale, which is going to take that long anyway. And because I've got all the back end sorted, I can easily produce all the information the PEs want, get them all organised, cut the PEs, carve out costs from 2.5% down to 1.5%. That makes them look attractive as well.
Fascinating.
So
I totally understand what you're doing. I've never heard anybody do that before.
no, that's because it's at my brain. My brain's talk to my wife. It's a bit different.
Well, frankly, I think different is good.
Okay, maybe can I give you my wife's number and can you pass that on?
I will try to sell it to her, but I'm not sure she's going to buy it.
Yeah, I've been trying to sell it to her for 37 years now. Okay, tell me a bit about you, Raincatcher. And the thing that I found that I liked about you was that initial part, that you're interested in what happens to people after they exit. I went through your website and that's what really attracted me. But please, we've been doing a lot of talking about me, which is unusual. Tell me about yourself.
Yeah. Well, again, as you indicated, I went to journalism school and I started my career at a small publishing company as a copywriter. And that's how I thought I would spend my career. I thought I would eventually go to work in an advertising agency. And, things happen and you just exploit the opportunities as they come along. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. And a lot of people left the first company I was in, kind of a mutiny, really. And that created a huge vacuum. And I stepped up into a marketing director position because there was nobody else to do it, even to do pretty well. And then I just moved along the food chain. And our company, when I started, it was a $7 million business. And by the mid 80s, we'd gotten all the way to 15 million and we were sold off to a huge book publishing company out of New York called Macmillan, Fortune 100 company. And they said, hey, we kind of like this business. We want you to grow it. We want you to go out and buy companies. It's faster than just trying to depend on organic growth. Didn't tell us how to do it. It was like taking the proverbial 6-month-old baby, putting him or her into a pool and saying, swim. And as we've talked about from the failure standpoint, happenstance, the first deal was one that I did for the company. Again, they didn't teach us how to do this. And I got a PhD on that deal because I made a lot of mistakes. It wasn't on the technical front end, on accounting diligence or any of the other measurable factors. It was mistakes on the immeasurable factors, primarily the people factors. And
integration's a killer, isn't it?
Integration, corporate culture, understanding the motivations of critical position people. And yeah, we killed it in about a year. Now, thankfully, it was a very small deal. But if you want to survive in that kind of a corporate world, you don't make those mistakes twice. So you learn really fast. And then we ultimately became a deal machine. And we built that company in 5 years from 15 million to 90 million. We were sold off under a hostile takeover, and the former senior executives of the parent teamed up with the massive private equity firm Colbert Kravis Roberts, and they bought our business back. And we started it over again, and we grew it to 400 million. I ran it for a few years, and then I left, wrote a business plan, and started it over and partnered with JP Morgan Chase Banks. And we built from about 3.5 years from $0 on my kitchen table to roughly 120 million.
Nice.
So you learn a lot in that process. And after that, I spent a year in New York doing a turnaround for the Hallmark Cards company. That was a difficult assignment, but I loved that one. I spent 5 years as a partner in a boutique consulting firm doing exit and transition planning for business owners. And that was a passion of mine because when I was acquiring companies, I saw so many companies make so many mistakes about how they packaged their business and whether or not they were smart enough to spend the money on professional advisors, that they always left a lot of money on the table. And as a buyer, it wasn't my job to tell them that. But I always thought that was kind of sad because most business owners, when they sell, it's their true major source of any wealth, and hopefully generational wealth. And if your company's worth $3 million, but you could have gotten $4 million, that's a lot of money you left on the table. So that's been one of my goals in my career and where I am today, to kind of help these people. And that's our firm Raincatcher is focused on providing professional investment banking representation and management for the lower middle market business owners, kind of 1 million to 10 million in profits, to truly help represent them as they need to be to maximize valuations on their businesses.
And it really is necessary. Both your first M&A right the way through to where you are now. People generally only do this once or twice, and that includes the C-suite as well. The very first thing I did when my mentor said hey, you've got to stop working for the Big Four accountings and start doing things for yourself, was I wrote out a online program for C-suite on how to do M&As. And then as I started to work with people and chat with people about it, they said, well, the C-suite are never going to do your course. And they were right. They were never going to do it. And why? Ego. Ego was the big thing. They didn't feel that they needed, because they were really good at getting the signatures on the page. But then that's just the beginning. Then 83% of M&As fail after that signature goes on the page because of what happens thereafter. And the C-suite lose interest after that. That isn't their major priority, because they've done the deal, they've done what they know, and then they pass it on to other people to take care of. And those people don't have any experience.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, typically about 90% of the transaction process is focused on the front end, price and terms negotiations, and only about 10% on anything related to deal integration. And as you said, yeah, that's the make it or break it. And what I've seen so many times is the acquiring company, it's an ego thing. They says their attitude is, hey, we bought you, therefore we're right and you're wrong. You're going to do everything our way. It's our way or the highway. And as I said in my first deal, not reading people and understanding what was important to them and what criteria or the nature of their corporate culture was, it could be a total deal killer. So we developed a very successful approach to that on the front end, to talk with as many people in the company as we could. But as soon as the deal was done, money had been wired, etc., we set up individual meetings, in some cases with every single employee in the company, but certainly a very large pool of senior and middle level people, one-on-one, with nobody else from their company in there, so they could talk freely and candidly. And it was just a simple conversation. I would say, hey, what do you like about your company that you want to make sure we keep doing? What would you like to see us start doing that the company's not currently doing? And then by the third question, you already knew the answer to it, but you always save the negative for last. And that is, what do you want to see your company stop doing? And they've already answered that in the first two questions. But it's amazing what you learn from people if you simply give them the opportunity. And there's a lot of intelligence and insight, especially where they have ideas for growth or areas where the company is bleeding or is it's some way weak, and it's monumental in your ability to truly integrate that business. And in our company, when I did my first roll up to 400 million, we were about the most profitable on a margin basis company in the media industry, because as we acquired all these businesses, we would identify what they were doing better than we were doing, and we would integrate best practices, and they could see that we were adapting some of the things they were doing into the broader company, and it created tremendous efficiencies and helped these people feel like they're already contributing and being part of a combined corporate culture.
The gold nuggets, absolutely. They are the winner. But you just said something there. Now, one of my really pet hates, and I try and beat this out of people, out of organizations, is, and they'll use when referring to the acquired company, they'll use the old name. No, it's not such and such. They are a part of us. They're the such and such location, but they are us. They're not the old company name at all. If you talk to them as if they are isolated, that is how they're going to feel. That is going to increase the personnel leaving the organisation because they don't feel part of the new organisation. And it totally affects their psychology if you keep referring to them as the old name.
You're exactly right. Seen it many times.
Now, I've made plenty of mistakes. I really have, Cameron. When you talk about all that touchy-feely stuff you were talking about, well, M&As, I've done a lot of M&As in the past, and I've been brought in when they get into trouble. So normally I'm given a template. This is how it's supposed to fit. And then you've got all these extra bits around, and I've been the hammer and chisel, chipping off those extra bits and getting rid of them. It took me a while to figure out what you've just explained, that you don't have to make it a template. You can take the rough edges, integrate those in, and those rough edges keep the personnel, they keep the personality of the site as well, and they might even be some gold nuggets on those outer edges there that you can take on board.
Yeah, and I would add to that again with the process of asking people questions and listening to them. You go into that process, that integration process, or in a case of another engagement I had, I spent 3 years doing a very complex business and technology turnaround on a company. And I went into that with certain assumptions based on the information I had. And as I went through my start, stop, keep interview process, a number of those assumptions I had, if I would have executed on the changes I had planned based on those assumptions, I probably would have destroyed the business because I
Wow.
would have changed things that were sacrosanct for that company. So we learned to adapt there. But I also learned that the area I thought that was a major problem in the company actually was not. It was a whole different division that ultimately required radical transformation of the entire business model because that's where the company was really bleeding. But I couldn't see that going into it. And only through these conversations where people were allowed to be candid could I have learned that.
Yes. And at the very beginning of our conversation today, we spoke about going and talking with business owners and finding out about what they're going to be doing after they exit. So what you just said there reminds me of that. Pretty much the first question because you don't go into an organization and say, oh, do you want to sell blah, 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 or anything like that. You go in and you ask, okay, what would you like to be doing in, say, 2 years' time? Where would you like to be? Can you describe it? And you do it over for me, a hot chocolate with marshmallows. They might be a coffee. And you develop the relationship first and you find out what their ambitions are. And that way it makes it easier to work with them in the future because you can always refer back to, okay, this is where you want to be. This is how we're going to get you there.
Right. I agree completely. And our approach on that in the investment banking world, because we get a lot of referrals from other happy customers or other professionals like lawyers and accountants and what have you. But if they contact us, the first question we ask them is the why. Why are you contacting us, and why are you thinking about selling, and what is important to you in that process? And then if we engage with them, we structure our entire process around addressing their quote unquote why factor. If they're extremely concerned about their employees, when we're outsourcing buyers, we're going to be highly sensitive about the type of potential buyers that we look at in order to see that they will align with sort of the cultural fit, the mission, vision, values that that business owner has. So sometimes everybody thinks of investment bankers as dollars and cents and percentages and tough and rumble contract negotiations. But sometimes we are the equivalent of Match.com, where we're trying to match a buyer who has a competitive bid and terms and deal structure with the kind of style and culture that they're going to bring in as a new owner for a business. And then the rest of the time, we play kind of psychologist because we coach our clients through the emotional roller coaster. And it is a roller coaster over the traditional 9-month period of time it generally takes to sell a company. There's a lot of highs and lows. And a lot of times we are focused on just talking our client down off of the cliff, but also, to your point, sort of talking to them about what's their life going to look like once this deal is closed. Because most of the time, nobody's ever asked them that question.
No. Well, you just answered my next question already, so I won't even bother with that one. It was all about coaching and working with your clients. So you were right on to that. Thank you. Well, Cameron, I think this has been a pretty good conversation.
Enjoyed it.
I'm very glad that we recorded it. Now, do you think we could have another conversation and explore some other stuff?
Love to.
I will package this up and get it off to you and make sure, because I think there's been some really valuable stuff in this conversation as well.
Deal. I hope I've been able to share some things that will be beneficial for your podcast audience.
You have, absolutely. Now, we'll just cut out that bit about my wife, okay?
All right. Well, if you insist.
Well, I'd like to make it 38 years.
I was hoping I'd have a little ammunition to use as a leverage with you.
Regrettably, I think my wife thinks I'm a lost cause, so I don't think she has high expectations of me changing in any fashion.
You've been together 37 years. I suspect she's going to stick with you.
Excellent. Well, it's been a pleasure, Cameron. I'm afraid I have to go. I've got another appointment to get to. What time of night is it over there?
Right now, Central Time in the United States, it is 5:36 p.m.
Easy.
Piece of cake.
Yeah, easy. I don't feel bad at all.
Shouldn't.
It's been a pleasure, Cameron. Thank you so much. And
you as well.
I'll shoot you off an email and we'll catch up, okay?
Sounds good. Great to meet you.
Okay. See ya. Bye.
Bye now.